Welcome to the Cookworthy Museum. In the 13th century, the Abbot of Buckfast created the new town of Kingsbridge, on the hill at the head of the Kingsbridge estuary. Transport in the town was by boat and horse, before the turnpike roads came to be. From the quay, with water coming right up to Mill Street, the main thoroughfare of Fore Street climbs a steep hill. Here you would have found inns, shops, a market, a church, and dwelling houses with gardens and orchards. Over time, Kingsbridge became the market town for the whole of the South Hams, the prosperous farming region of South Devon. In 1671, a grammar school was built to provide education for boys which previously the monks had given. It is this old grammar school building that now holds the Cookworthy Museum that tells the story of rural life in the South Hams. There is much to see. The old grammar school and old boys' rooms, an Edwardian pharmacy, a Victorian kitchen and scullery, 2 temporary exhibition rooms, and a farm gallery in the attractive walled garden. Bringing us right up to date is the local Heritage Resource Centre, based on the ground floor of the headmaster's house. We hope you enjoy the journey. The old grammar school room. Close to the top of Fore Street Hill is a long grey building, the old grammar school. Above the door was once inscribed, "This grammar school was built and endowed in 1670 by Thomas Crispin of the city of Exeter, father who was born in this town on the 6th of January 1607. Lord, what I have 'twas thou that gavest me, and of thine own I this return to thee." In the old grammar school room, you can almost feel the ghosts of the masters and pupils from hundreds of years ago. Its panelled walls bear witness to the generations who have studied here.
Be seated.
Above the canopy of the headmaster's dais is the crest of Charles II, and beside this hangs a full-length portrait of Thomas Crispin, founder of the grammar school. These Fore Street premises were used for boarders until 1951, for school meals until 1956, and then in 1962, when Mr. Lyle, the last headmaster, retired, the buildings became derelict. Sadly, no one wanted this large Grade 2 listed building. Although there was an attempt to convert the site into an entertainment centre, planning permission was not granted. It was the inspiration of one Mrs. Northcote to purchase the buildings and convert them into a China clay museum. But why on earth a China clay museum in Kingsbridge, you may rightly inquire? Well, William Cookworthy, the father of the China clay industry, was born in Kingsbridge back in 1705. The China clay connection arises from Cookworthy's interest in the manufacture of porcelain, which until his own discoveries had always been a Chinese secret. Following lengthy experimentation using the kaolin and Betunce clays found in Cornwall, he produced the very first fine, hard, paste fluorescent porcelain to be manufactured in England. A small display of Plymouth and Bristol Cookworthy and Champion porcelain is on display in the Cookworthy room. In 1972, the Cookworthy Museum was opened in the old grammar school building under the sponsorship of English China Clays. They withdrew in the mid-1980s, generously donating the buildings to the Cookworthy Museum. You can read more about the life of William Cookworthy in the book by Hubert Fox, which is on sale in the museum. The Cookworthy Room. The story of Kingsbridge and the beautiful South Hams area unfolds in the Cookworthy Room. Take a step back in time, millions of years before men and women roamed the countryside. Follow the story of the nomads who settled to farm the area, the abbots of Buckfast Lee as they establish an early settlement, and Kingsbridge itself as it grows into the thriving market town we know today. There is much for the visitor to experience, and nearly all on open display. From the lie of the land to the early settlers and the development of Kingsbridge and Dodbrooke, 2 medieval towns separated only by a brook. The earliest known map of Kingsbridge was made in 1586, when Fore Street looked very similar to the way it looks today. The all-important marketplace was situated outside the church. This was later dismantled and the timbers were used to form the Shambles, that's its historic name, which you see today. All of the houses had long gardens with side passages leading down to the brook. You can see the sheep's knuckle bones that were once used as a durable paving material in a side passage. The towns of Kingsbridge and Dodbrooke merged in the 1900s, and the latter exists only as a suburb of Kingsbridge, which by now has become a thriving town with shops and businesses. Travel has always been difficult in the narrow, windy lanes of the South Hams, and transport was initially by pack animals, and from 1824, with the help of the Turnpike Trust, by coach and cart. Far easier was travel by sea, and by 1857 there was a regular packet service by paddle steamer to Salcombe and Plymouth. The railway came late to Kingsbridge and sadly lasted a mere 100 years before the beautiful Primrose Line was closed during the Beeching Cuts. Kingsbridge was the centre for a widespread rural community, and by the 1800s there were well over 20 public houses in the town. Each inn had its own brew house and individual beverages. In one such inn, the near-legendary White Ale was brewed. It may be no coincidence, then, that by 1819 there was a police presence in the town. The town hall was built in 1850 with its own magistrates' court and police lockup. The Real Cinema occupies this site today. Latterly, the police station was built at the top of Fore Street in 1938 and replaced in 1996. Here we see a painting of water coming up to the present Boots building. Compare it to what we see today, and you can clearly see how the town has changed. Moving through the room, we see Mrs. Grogan's doll's house that was built in between 1920 and 1922, with electric lighting installed in 1928. This item is a real joy for children and adults alike. Here we also find the first local telephones and a Victorian post box, which gave Kingsbridge its first remote contact with the wider world. Moving along, we reach the headmaster's dais with his desk, canopy and seat. Now what's that on the seat? It's a little yellow duckling named Charlotte, one of 10 lost ducklings for children to find when taking the William Cookworthy Duck Quiz. Also on the desk are albums with photographs from the museum's collection. Feel free to ask to view these from our database in the local Heritage Resource Centre, which we'll explore at the end of this presentation. There's also a report on the Hall Sands disaster, which involved the destruction of the village in the storms of 1901 and 1917, following the removal of shingle from the cliffs below. Only one house survived, where, until her death in the 1960s, Miss Prettyjohn lived. The thriving market town had its own iron foundry and town mill. The mill, dating back to the 1200s, was originally used to grind flour, but during the Napoleonic Wars its use was changed to produce serge, a denim-like material that was used to make soldiers' uniforms. The mill was eventually closed in 1967. This painting shows the town mill behind the area which became International Stores and now Peacocks. You can clearly see the chimney cowl that is now on display at the bottom of the museum's walled garden. The iron foundry was built in 1739 and operated by the Lidstone family. It was subsequently taken over by the Burgoynes around 1920 and sadly destroyed in the Second World War. A classic example of a Burgoyne's range can be found in our own Victorian kitchen. Being so close to the sea, shipbuilding was important to Kingsbridge. Many smaller boats were built locally in the Dates boatyard, while several larger boats were commissioned by a consortium of businessmen within the town to sail to America and Australia. Here we have a model of an Australian fruit boat on display. Various other objects of local interest are displayed on the south side of the Cookworthy room, which overlooks the courtyard and where the inscribed graffiti can best be read. A quilt designed by Brenda Marshall to celebrate life in Kingsbridge in the 1990s. The Kingsbridge town stocks. Some blacksmith's bellows. The Dodbrooke mace. And a soldier's dress sword. Certainly the most beautiful and most valuable items on display in the Cookworthy room are the examples of Cookworthy porcelain. Several of the pieces were purchased by English China Clays, whilst others are on loan from the City of Plymouth Museum and Art Gallery. A favourite piece is called Asia, and represents one of the 4 continents known at that time. Can you tell why this piece would represent Asia? Because if you look closely, there's a camel around the back of the very elegant lady. A diversion now into the costume gallery. At the Cookworthy Museum, we have 2 galleries for temporary exhibitions. Each winter, a team of curatorial volunteers with a range of interests and skills plan a new display so that every Easter, when the museum reopens for the season, there is one major new exhibition to view. For 2005, we celebrate the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. Our exhibition is titled South Hams at War, in memory of all those affected in the South Hams, including the evacuation of 9 villages to prepare for the D-Day landings and the bombing of Kingsbridge itself. Also in the main gallery is a painting of the temporary barracks in Waterside Park in 1804 that housed around 600 soldiers during the Napoleonic Wars, and the Coomorian helmet found hidden in the wall of Averton Gifford Church circa 1800 that appears to be of Spanish origin. South Hams on the Move. This exhibition is called On the Move, a display of travel and transport in the South Hams, and has been one of our most successful yet. Our team of volunteers has designed and built a scene from Loddiswell railway station on the beautiful old but now defunct Primrose line, featuring a painted backdrop of the old station building. With a rather grand lady and 2 children waiting on the platform, we've tried to recreate a genuine scene from the golden age of steam. In the centre of the room, however, is the star attraction, a real bus. The cab has been taken from a Bristol LH bus, along with several pairs of seats, and was built in 1977. It started out with London Transport and was later bought by Tally-Ho Coaches, and was used as a school bus in the Kingsbridge area and as a service bus between Kingsbridge and Sorkham. It worked locally until 2003, and parts of it are still working here, entertaining children of all ages, and particularly dads and granddads. These buses were very useful around Kingsbridge, as they're only 7 feet 6 inches wide and ideal for our narrow lanes. A slideshow with local views from the last 50 years can be played onto the screen in front of the bus by pressing one of the controls in the cab, so kids of all ages can enjoy a fully interactive ride. The On the Move exhibition includes picture displays showing many different types of transport used in the South Hams over the years, such as the development of the railway and village stations, horse and carts, pony and traps, boats of the estuary for work and for pleasure, coach and horses, bicycles, aeroplanes, and the omnibus. The Edwardian Pharmacy. Moving back downstairs, we enter an original pharmaceutical chemist shop, as it would have looked from Victorian times until the end of the 1960s. This is a very rare artefact indeed. One could easily identify a chemist's shop by the large glass jars or carboys that decorated the windows and were filled with various coloured liquids. Once inside, the fittings were all made of mahogany, with rows of shelves, a long counter, and glass-fronted floor cupboards. There was always at least one chair for the customer to sit upon whilst waiting for the pharmacist, who would be hidden in his or her dispensary to compound the medicines. The long shelf displays were known as drug runs and housed dozens of powdered and liquid chemicals. The lower section of drawers was for yet more powders, pieces of root, leaf or bark from all around the world, which contained a multitude of active medical ingredients. For example, you'd find senna from the senna pod, which acted as a very strong laxative. Dried chamomile flowers were used to make tea for calming indigestion. Tragacanth tree gum was used to thicken medicines. And coal tar from distillation was used to cure itchy or sore skin. You'd also expect to find opium tincture, dragon's blood, wood smoke, paraffin wax, tinctures, spirits, and an assortment of other powders. Notice that all the labelling is in Latin, as this was the language of the medical world at this time. Various manufactured products were displayed in the floor cabinets. Older visitors will remember these from their childhood. Note how many animal medicines were also sold. There were also wicked-looking pieces of apparatus for administering enemas, ear sprays and inhalants. Makes you glad to be living in this era, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm just here to try and show you how they used to make pills for people who were poorly in the 1800s. This book here has got formulae from about 1830 to probably 1850. In those days, there was very little. They didn't go to the doctors very often, but they used to go to the local apothecary or pharmacist. What they used to do, they used to get a base for the pills, which was called a pill mass. And they used to put it in the little mortar there. And then you can see here that there's iron in these pills. It says here, pill hydrage, there's mercury in them, and there's iron, and there's some ipecac, and there's some aloes. So we've got to make altogether 16 pills. And so we've got to put exactly 32 grains of the mercury into the little mortar with the pill mass, and of the ipecac, and of the aloes. 8 grains of the ipecac, and 16 of the aloes. And then we should have a pestle, but I haven't got a pestle for this mortar. It's a proper pill mortar, just used for making pills. And you used to mix it all up and make sure that you got it all evenly distributed in the pill mass. Otherwise someone might be poisoned, they might get an overdose if you didn't do that carefully. And then you used to roll the pills out on a machine, just like this. This is an old one. It actually belonged to the pharmacy in Kingsbridge. So you kept on rolling it out until you got exactly the number. This machine actually does either 6 pills, 12 pills, 18 or 24. Here we are, we're at 16 now, so we just put them on there. And you just slide that along over the top. And there we are, we've got 16 little pills. And if they're all evenly, all the same size, then we've got exactly the right amount of ingredient in each pill. So there we are. All we have to do now is, this is what they call a little rounder. So you just go like that with it, and then it makes a little round pill like that. And you do go and do them all like that, and then you pop them in a little box, and you put a little label on the top, a little label. This just happens to be a cream label, actually. It was a little round label like that, and you used to write on what they were, the pills, and who they were for, and then it says on here, it's all in Latin, this actually is bis die, which means 1 twice a day. So the poor patient had to take 1 twice a day. But I'm afraid, I can't see that there's very much in the ingredients that make them better.
The Old Boys' Room. Upstairs again to the Old Boys' Room, which celebrates the grammar school as it developed over the years, before moving to the new buildings at Westville in 1931. The first headmaster was William Duncombe, the choice of founder Thomas Crispin, who opened the school in 1671, with, as he put it, 12 small boys in suits of grey friezed cloth, and their satchels stored with books, all gifts of the generous donor. Thomas Crispin left money in his will to support the school, as did William Duncombe, who also provided scholarships, apprenticeships, and a Duncombe lecturer to preach in Kingsbridge. Remarkably, the Duncombe and Crispin charities still exist to this day and support Kingsbridge Community College and the Duncombe lecturer. The school experienced times of varying fortunes over the years, and numbers fluctuated from a mere handful to a maximum of 80 before the First World War. A new wing was built for boarders, the Spartan conditions clearly illustrated by the wash bowls on display. Baths were for termly boarders on Saturdays. Weekly boarders from Salcombe and the surrounding villages had to bathe at home. Pupils came from Salcombe by boat and from the villages by horse and cart. The display illustrates various aspects of the life of a small boys' grammar school in the first half of the 20th century. There are glorious sporting trophies displayed in a cabinet, photographs and portraits of various headmasters, a roll call of past pupils who served in the First World War, the school bell, a desk with an inkwell, a dazzling blazer and cap, and the school clock that's still working. It really is the story of a bygone era. The Victorian Kitchen and Scullery. The Victorian kitchen, used for cooking meals until 1956, is displayed to illustrate life before electricity. The large black leaded Burgoyne kitchen range, manufactured in Kingsbridge, with its cooking pots and kettles, would have been used for all aspects of cooking and heating. The kitchen table was the centre for food preparation and kitchen meals. Victorian and later technologies enabled many labour-saving devices to be used in the kitchen, and the following are on display in the museum. An early refrigerator, which consisted of an icebox lined with lead from the early 1900s. Vacuum cleaners from the very primitive to the Baby Daisy on show at the Paris exhibition of 1901. An early pressure cooker. Various early kitchen implements such as knife cleaners and sharpeners, juice extractors, bean cutters, mincers, marmalade slicers, and a sugar cutter. In the dresser, a fine Royal Doulton china dinner service. Also on display are various articles for day-to-day use in the kitchen of the period, such as flat irons. High up on the wall, one can find the bells used to call maids to the drawing room, dining room, or bedrooms. Next door, we enter the scullery, where all wet and dirty work of that period was carried out. Here one can find a copper, a water pump, a huge earthenware sink and wooden plate rack, a posser and washing board, a mangle and an early version of the washing machine, and a charming bath that was filled with hot water and placed in front of the kitchen range. Now, here's an interesting artefact. Any ideas what it may be? Well, it's a peel or oven paddle that was used to move bread in and out of a hot oven in a commercial bakery.
Well, hello children. This morning we are going to do cooking as the Victorians did it. And the Victorians, of course, that is over 100 years ago. And the main thing when people were cooking in those days, they relied on this book, which is Mrs. Beeton's Book of Cookery. And it is just massive. We're going to make what we call a caraway seed cake. So what they used to flavour their cakes was something called caraway seeds, and this is caraway seeds. Very, very small little seeds, but fantastic flavour. A lot of children didn't like them because they were such strong flavour, and a lot of children would pick the seeds out of their cake. But that's what we're going to do this morning, make a caraway seed cake. Of course, butter was used because the farmers had plenty of butter, and it was usually rolled like this, or lard. For cheaper cakes, you would use lard. Eggs, of course, were very plentiful in the springtime and the summer, but in the winter, they were not very plentiful. And so consequently, the cakes in the winter time, you only had very few eggs, so you made it then with potatoes. We used to have potato cake and what they call soda cake, no eggs at all. Milk, of course, from the cows, always in a jug. Didn't come by the milkman, so it was always in a jug like that. In Victorian times, they didn't have running water like we have now, and they had to use water from the scullery, and our scullery is out there. So, have you all washed your hands before you came in?
Yes!
Oh, that's great. That all looks really very good. Now, the first thing we're going to do is 3 ounces of butter. So we take 3 ounces of butter from here, and put it on the ware. So will you put 3 ounces up there? Three ounces of butter. Put that in our basin. And while she's weighing out 3 ounces of sugar, I want you two boys to beat up the eggs. 4 ounces of flour. You've got to put your weights up first. We're creaming the butter and the sugar together. It's a little bit cold. Kitchens were very often cold in Victorian times. Now, would you just like to turn that around a little bit? If you could pass me the eggs, that's great. That'll do, I think. So if you could take 1 teaspoonful of the seeds, not too many because people didn't like them, that's right, and throw that in there. That's great. Now, would you like to mix those seeds into that? All right, rub it around ever so quickly. Just a bit of peel, lemon peel. We'll pop the eggs in, just like so. Now, I think it would be a good idea for the boys now to have a go at mixing this. And now you put the flour into... That's the idea. Tip it all in. That's right, fine. And then stir it around carefully. You don't beat it now. Once you put the flour in, you can stir it very, very carefully. Right, thank you, James. Now then, we just give it a good quick plonk like that, and then we have another lot, and then you take your knife and you put it in like that. You see, you don't have it stuck around the side. It happens, and then you've just got to smooth it around. Scrape out the basin, make sure you've got all those seeds, and in it goes. There we are. And then we spread it around the bottom. And the next thing we've got to do is to put it in the oven. And our oven is looking really nice and hot. I see the glow in the fire. And we're going to put this cake in the left-hand oven because we're going to make rock cakes, and they like a very hot oven. The right-hand one is the hot oven. The left-hand one is more suitable for cakes. So we put the lemon each side. One that way and one that way, and that makes it look more attractive. Sometimes the lemon does sink into the cake, but usually it sits up on the top. So, and that is all ready to go in the oven now. You've got to look at your oven because it's a very hot oven, so you mustn't take your eyes off the oven. Ooh, crumbs. Look, children, I think it's just ready. Look at that, it is ready. That's good. So we'll bring that out. And we did earlier make some rock buns, didn't we? And they've gone in the very hot oven. So hopefully they're cooked at the same time. Oh, yes, they're ready. 2 hands I use. That's on the table. Well, you've done very well.
The Farm Gallery. The museum's collection of farm implements is assembled in a new large farm gallery built in part of the headmaster's garden at the old grammar school. It's an almost complete set of horse and hand implements necessary to run an average local farm with horsepower between the 2 great wars before tractor power took over in about 1940. Of the cultivation implements, we start with the ploughs, which turned the soil in furrows, burying any trash to leave clean soil on top. The museum has several varieties, but the most important one is the balance plough, made in Kingsbridge by E. Steer and Son. To break down the ploughing and create suitable seedbed for sowing seeds were cultivators, scarifiers, harrows and rollers. Note the triangular cultivator on wheels with 9 tines, which break up the soil and, with alternate harrowing and rolling, produce the required seedbed. In addition, these tools are used after harvest to break up the stubble, and with further use of the chain harrow will break up lumps and roll stubble into heaps for burning. This was good environmental practice, as the cultivation also germinated weed seed that was buried by the next ploughing. The museum has a locally made 3-row root drill with fertiliser box attached, which sowed turnip, kale or mangold seeds down small spouts and fertiliser down larger spouts. Broadcast by hand, the seed was held in a receptacle known as a seed lip. Throwing grass seeds on the wind would achieve a sowing as even as could be wished. The museum has the most prominent and complicated machine for corn harvesting of the time, a reaper binder. Throughout history, corn cut with a sickle scythe had to be raked into sheaf size and tied by hand. Our first reaper binders came from America around 1900. Complicated machines capable of dealing with standing crops 5 feet high and adjustable to deal with weather-beaten crops almost flat and tangled near the ground. The museum also has a 1-horse shaft reaper that was used for hay, grass and weed cutting. Of the transport vehicles, the high 2-wheeled butt cart and the 4-wheeled harvest wagon are the most important. The museum has a smaller than usual butt cart made and donated by the late Robert Wingate of Kingsbridge. The 4-wheeled wagon, owned by the late Brian Donovan, was restored by Mr. Len Geaches, a retired wheelwright with assistance from the staff and boys at Kingsbridge School. Can you guess which is the new wheel? Local farmer Hubert Snowden donated the wheel drag, safety chain and wagon ropes, all necessary on our hills, and fitted to the wagon. Hung above the wagon are hay grabs, used in conjunction with a tall hay pole to hoist loose hay or straw onto stacks. Before the modern-day pickup baler revolutionised bringing home the hay sweep and hay pole caused a previous revolution from pitching hay onto wagons with pitchforks and off again to stacks or barns. When dry enough in the field, the cut hay swathes were horse-raked into larger rows, more convenient for loading, and the horse used long chains to drag it back to where the stack was to be built. The large cider press is an impressive feature, and very important because every farm had its cider orchards. Cider was Devon's workers' popular drink and was usually free. It may have been given in lieu of wages, but after one particular wage rise, the allowance of 4 pints daily, which was doubled at harvesting, was reduced to 3 pints by the wage board. Believe it or not, it was difficult to obtain workers at one time if there was no cider. Beside the cider press is a hand-turned apple crusher consisting of 2 stone rollers and a small hand press for small quantities. However, the horse and machine-powered crushers were faster, and the larger commercial pounds exerted enormous pressure on the cheese of apple pulp to squeeze out all the juice. The juice was allowed to ferment into cider, after which the wooden barrel containers were bunged down airtight to prevent it oxidizing into acid. It then took another 6 weeks or more before it was palatable to drink. And then there are the hand tools, such as axes, billhooks, saws, shovels, diggers, pitchforks, hoes and rakes, which are just as important as the bigger machines. Less well known is the straw rope spinner used in thatching, and the rick borer that's used to bore ventilation holes into overheating haystacks to prevent them from catching fire. These machines are definitely worthy of special interest and care, since they are mainly wood and becoming rarer. This is a wide-ranging collection because of the demands of fertile South Devon's varied cropping.
Well, I'm Hubert Snowden. I was born in 1918, at the end of the First War, and I was born on the farm. Of course, took up farming. The only son. I had 5 sisters. I was the only son. Expected to carry on farming. I wanted to anyway, because living in a lovely valley, a lovely farm, and with all the animals and outdoor life is all I ever wanted. Actually, this was the original grammar school, dating back 15 or 1600 or something. But we came here for meals and science we had here in the laboratory. But we were taught, the main school then was down at 24th Street. And then in 1931 we moved up to the new school where the comprehensive school is now. That was the new grammar school. I didn't want to come what we called a pen pusher. I was afraid, you know, that if I came here they'd expect me to take an office job or something, because farming was looked down on in the academic world, you know. Here the headmaster, that they were, we farmers weren't treated to too well. The implements you got here is what fed the country all over the farming with horses, and that's what produced our food, except what we imported. But mainly we were self-supporting, especially through the war, very much so. My father was brought up with horses. He used to breed shires. He's a wonderful horseman. And then, 1940, you see, when the war came, we had to change to tractors. There weren't sufficient horses to produce the food that we needed through the war. We were imposed, the more work imposed on us, we had to plough up more fields and grow more arable crops, and the horses couldn't do it, so we had to get tractors, and that was difficult to change from horses to tractors. My father, in fact, he, when we were towing the self-binder with a tractor, with me on the seat, instead of 3 horses that he used to use in front of it before, he used to carry a whip, and he still carried this long whip. He used to touch up the horses, you see, and if I wasn't driving the tractor, then he'd use the whip on me. I mean, we converted a lot of these implements. There's some of these here, we converted them from horse machines to put on a shorter drawbar and that sort of thing to fit a tractor. If I had my life over again, I'd like to go back to that life. Although we worked longer hours, we were happier and better fed. I would go back to it right away if I had my life over again.
The local Heritage Resource Centre. This centre is the focus of the public access provision to all the resources of the Cookworthy Museum and is open throughout the year. In 2003, it was reopened following a Heritage Lottery-funded refurbishment. The facilities are excellent and include the following: a microfilm reader and printer with access to local newspapers dating back to 1855, a public access computer giving access to all the museum's databases. Copies of photographs from our database of over 6,000 images may be ordered here, as well as printouts from the local history database. A service point for the Devon Record Office with local archives and microfiche reader for historical parish records. Copies of tithe maps and apportionments for the Kingsbridge catchment area. Research facilities including a small library, local history files, census details and trade directories. In addition to the resources, we also have research assistants on hand to offer support. The Cookworthy Museum's curatorial team of volunteers work behind the scenes all year and maintain the highest professional standards. The group's interests and expertise include specialisms in the following areas: accessioning, collection care and conservation, construction, historical costume, local history and recording. We hope you enjoy your visit to the Cookworthy Museum, encourage you to explore our local Heritage Resource Centre and invite you to become a friend, a steward or even a member of the curatorial team. Thank you for watching.